In an age where technology gives us what we want when we want it, whether it's 1 hour shipping from Amazon, chat boards where we discuss our favorite hobbies ad nauseum, or an endless stream of new lives reviving us after a death in an exciting video game, how does real life, which is complete with complicated social relationships and disappointments, ever compete? Are we losing our ability to experience joy in the offline world? Find out how technology may be impacting you and what you can do about it. Coming up. Hello, this is Emily with Natural Health for Life, and we are adding on to our series of how technology affects us in the modern world. I'm here with Virginia Brown, president of the Bioelectric Shield and occupational therapist. We are going to be talking about specifically screen time, iPhones, TVs, internet. How is that affecting us? In our last talk on the effects of technology in the body, Virginia and I discussed how EMFs harm us by inhibiting detoxification and relaxation. And that's definitely an effect of using wireless technology in particular, like cell phones, wireless phones, iPads, and laptops. If you missed that discussion, you can check back for it in our other videos, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Virginia is actually the co-developer of the Bioelectric Shield and is quite an expert on the topic of protecting yourself from wireless technology. In fact, some of the topics that came up while we were recording our last video made us decide that it could be very worthwhile to do some more research and see how technology affects the brain directly. Because we knew that internet and wireless devices had become so prevalent that even if people knew they were bad for you, they might still have trouble giving them up. Virginia actually had been telling me about a fascinating book that she read on this topic called A Deadly Wandering, and I want to let her tell you about that story.
Well, Emily, we've come to an age where you can get, free second day. Well, it's not free. You join Amazon Prime and you can get things shipped, overnight or second day, and that's just ordinary. You can get on chat boards. You can be on Facebook for hours at a time. You can communicate with people all over the world. And there's one common necessary ingredient, and that is you have to be sitting in front of some sort of screen, whether it's your smartphone or your computer, your tablet, it doesn't really matter. And scientists are finding that there's some neurological implications to that. And not only for the person doing it, but if you're a parent, there's some implications for your children as well. So that's part of what we're going to really focus on today in this conversation. There are kids today, they're called digital natives. And one of the questions is, what's happening with their brains when they spend so much time in front of a screen? What happens to their language skills and their social skills? Is the time in front of in front of the screen actually producing, bioneurological effects? And so that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Last time we talked about how the electromagnetic radiation from these devices can affect the brain, specifically development, the incidence of ADD, ADHD, and we want to go into that a little bit more today. There's some really interesting stories that have come out. There's a New York Times bestseller that's called A Deadly Wandering, and I first saw that book at an airport bookstore, and I needed something for the plane, so I bought it and was really sorry when the plane landed because I was so riveted to the story. So just to introduce this topic, I'd like to tell you a little bit about that event. So here's the story. You have a 19-year-old driving to work on a pretty open stretch of highway in Utah, heading toward Logan, Utah, and he is texting his girlfriend back and forth about 5 or 6 different times. And behind him is a gentleman that's, I think, probably in his 40s. He's what we call a farrier. So he's in a big Ford 250 hauling a trailer which has all the tools of his trade, which is anything that horses would need for their care. And he's watching this white Chevrolet drift into the opposite lane on a pretty regular basis. And he's getting a little concerned because it's a 2-lane highway. And if he's in the other lane, he's going to run into whatever's coming from the opposite direction. And as it turns out, there were two men, two fathers, as it turns out, who were rocket scientists going to work. And they were just having a nice morning, drinking their coffee, driving to work. And here's what happened. This young man, whose name was Reggie Shaw, he didn't apparently have his attention on the road. Apparently, he had his attention on the text that he was sending to his girlfriend. And he just drifted over the middle line just slightly. And it was just enough to clip the door handle of the vehicle with the two rocket scientists in it. That spun that vehicle around. Reggie kept driving on, pretty much unaware of what he had just caused in terms of a reaction. Meanwhile, the driver of the truck, to his horror, T-boned that vehicle, instantly killing both of those men, who left behind wives and families, children, and it was just incredibly tragic. So I guess Reggie sort of looked behind him and realized there had been an accident, and he kind of slowed down and stopped. And the man in the truck just, said to him, what were you doing? What were you thinking? And he's like, well, I was just driving to work. And this took several months and several neurologists, as well as the cell phone company, to really put together the fact that Reggie was literally unaware that his attention had been someplace else. And this is what we want to talk about today, because neuroscientists have shown for many, many years that you really can't pay attention to more than one thing at a time. We all really delude ourselves thinking that, of course, we can, answer emails, listen to our children, and plan a menu all at the same time. This is like normal life. But the fact is that we are literally jumping from one thing to the next without realizing it. So the question is, it became pretty clear where Reggie's attention was. It wasn't on the road. And they've done other studies. I'll just give you a few brief examples. In 2009, they did a study in which they calculated how often parents would interact with their children when the parents were watching TV versus not watching TV. And it was a pretty big difference. 54% of the time if they were watching TV, and almost 70% when they weren't watching TV. Well, how do you develop language skills? Well, you talk to your parents. And so if your parents are unavailable, and now I think it might possibly be even worse, because you don't need to be watching a TV. You can just have your smartphone with you and ignore your children, even though you're sitting right next to them. They've also found that when children don't have those social interactions, and instead maybe they're handed a little Xbox or something to play with, they develop ADD, ADHD much more readily, and they also have delays in language. And so, the bottom line to this is that you can see from really one other study I'll tell you about. In Bavaria, they found that when they added a cell tower to a town that previously hadn't had any, they studied adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, and acetylcholine. And what they found was that upon installing it within 60 days, pretty much all of the residents that were in the study, and it was almost 60 of them of all ages, had increases in their adrenaline and noradrenaline levels, which means that's a stress response. As time went on, what happened was that to balance out that high level of adrenaline and noradrenaline, the dopamine, which is what gives out secretions of pleasure, and the acetylcholine, which has to do with focusing and good sleep. When these things weren't functioning properly, the dopamine the dopamine levels and the acetylcholine went down, and that's not a happy situation because that meant that they would need to do something to be basically feeling good and happy again. And so it's almost as if the drugs can become addictive. And this is where I want to turn it back to you, Emily, because you did some research on this, and I'd like for our viewers to hear what you found about that.
I found this study on Facebook recently, and I almost couldn't believe it. It was done by child psychologist Yekaterina Murashova, who I assume is Russian. She did a study with 60 children ages 12 to 18. The goal? To see how they would respond to being alone for an 8-hour day without their accustomed technology. They couldn't use phones, radio, or TV while they were doing this study. The children were interested. They volunteered for this. They wanted to see what it would be like. And the study was hoping to prove that children today lack the skills necessary to entertain themselves on their own. They're too dependent on technology as a crutch and entertainment that's pushed out to them rather than being able to create and develop their own entertainment and sense of fulfillment through their activities and thoughts. According to the rules of the experiment, the children had to explain the next day how they had coped with being alone under such conditions. They were allowed to describe how they felt at the time of the experiment, keep a journal of their actions and thoughts, and in the case of excessive anxiety or discomfort or stress, the project leaders would recommend that they go ahead and stop the experiment immediately. They didn't have to continue if they didn't want to. They just needed to write down the time they stopped and the reason that they would stop. And altogether, they had 68 kids doing this study. Here's the jaw dropper, folks. Out of 68 teenagers, only 3 of them were able to complete 8 hours on their own. 3 out of 68 completed the study. That means 65 had to drop out because they were too stressed out to continue. I couldn't believe it. Here are the details. Most of the kids did fine for the first couple hours. The fun and novelty started to wear off after 2 to 3 hours. But some had extremely negative results. 5 of the kids had intense panic attacks. 3 had suicidal thoughts. 27 had actual physical symptoms of stress, illness, or detox. Hint, hint, including nausea, sweating, dizziness, hot flashes, and abdominal pain. And almost everyone who took part in the study experienced feelings of fear and anxiety. Why? That's a question that I want you guys to keep in mind as Virginia and I go through this discussion. Why are they having these symptoms as a result of being alone and entertaining themselves? Here's some of the things that they did do that were functional and fun and entertained them. They cooked and ate their meals. They read or tried to read. They did schoolwork, which was not required because this was a study taking place during a school vacation, but many of the kids decided to study anyway as kind of a seeking something to do, grasping at straws. Some looked out the window or strolled around the apartment. Some went outside to go to the store or the cafe, and technically they were supposed to be alone and they couldn't communicate with others according to the rules of the experiment. But I guess the experimenters decided that just going through a checkout with a seller or cashier wasn't a violation of those rules. Some kids did puzzles or constructed Lego models. Some did artwork or tried to draw. Took a shower, cleaned up. I guess that's a good way to get your kids to do their chores. Played with a dog or cat. Worked out in the gym or did gymnastics. Boy, these kids are so productive when they took away their technology. I wonder if they do these things on a regular basis. They recorded their feelings and thoughts in the journal. They wrote letters by hand. They played guitar or piano. They wrote poetry. One girl did embroidery. One boy spent nearly 5 hours riding buses around the city. Somebody went to an amusement park. One girl went to a museum, one boy went to the zoo, and one girl prayed. Almost all the participants tried to sleep at some point, but they weren't able to due to the unusual thoughts going around in their heads, this says. When it was over, remember, most of them terminated this early due to stress and discomfort. So when they finished, perhaps we should say, they reached out for comfort immediately. They started calling people, texting people, visiting friends and family, playing a computer game, watching a show. So they either reached out to people, often via technology, or they reached out to technology itself to soothe them. Interesting. And the signs of stress and all of the problems that they were having resulting from the study disappeared immediately when they reestablished these contacts. So when they were describing what happened in their own language, or in the language of addiction, they used words related to addiction. So they said things like dependence. It turns out I can't live without whatever it was. I had a dose, I had a withdrawal, I needed a this or that. All of them, without any exception, said they were extremely surprised by the thoughts that were crossing their minds during the experiment, but they were unable to examine the thoughts rationally because of the overall deterioration of their psychological state. And as a mom, I've been longing for this 8 hours of time by myself, but I guess these kids thought they could do it too, and it turned out to be shockingly stressful. Of the 3 people who did it, one of the 2 boys successfully completed the experiment by spending the entire 8 hours gluing together a model of a sailing ship. He did take a break for a meal and a walk with a dog. Another boy spent the first part of the time organizing all of his stuff. So I guess maybe they both had a little OCD and were able to use that to their advantage. I don't know. And they did not feel negative emotions during the time of the experiment. Hopefully, it looks like this is getting better with practice and exposure. So 63 of the teenagers admitted that the experiment had been useful for them in terms of allowing them to learn more about themselves. And 6 actually repeated the experiment on their own outside of the study afterwards and claimed that on the second or third or 5th attempt, they managed to go the whole day without serious problems. So I don't know what we were seeing here, but it sounded like the symptoms they experienced in terms of stress and physical stress, emotional stress during the study were what we would describe as withdrawal symptoms in other contexts. And the things that they did after the study was over, which was turn to their thing of choice, be it technology or social communication, to fill that need that they couldn't meet on their own. It asks a lot of questions, and I think that we can reflect on this as we move through our presentation today. But it's an amazing study, and I would encourage everyone who's in a position to do this on their own and let us know what you find. It's interesting to talk about the idea of internet addiction. A lot of us might think of, oh, that's a problem that teenagers have, texting late at night with their friends, or maybe grown men struggling with pornography addiction. And those are certainly issues. Those are part of the problem, but it's not necessarily the majority. It's actually very pervasive because of the way this technology has infiltrated our culture. So for example, middle-aged women like me are becoming Facebook addicts. It's not just a teenager thing. I think the 50-year-old bracket there is the most affected by that. professors in colleges are having to set up their classrooms with instruction on how cell phones are to be handled. Now, children, would you like to have a break after 20 minutes so that you can look at your cell phones at that point with the understanding that you won't be looking at them in the 20 minutes beforehand while I'm talking? You know, will that work out for you? Having to just set this up because it's too stressful for college students to be able to go for an hour without checking their phones. There are cell phone policies in high school and college classes now. So let's talk about it. Why is technology so addictive? According to the book Cyber Junkie by Kevin Roberts, the internet, and video games in particular, offer several advantages. See which of these might apply to your situation. Number one, a sense of community within a global village. This might be people that you chat with via your video game, even over headphones, or people who share a common interest. Like for me, I visit a lot of gardening forums on the internet or on Facebook. Number two is intermittent positive feedback, which we know is what Las Vegas uses to keep people coming back to the slot machines. The occasional win, the occasional beep, the occasional ping for doing a good job, getting messages, having people communicate with you on an occasional and intermittent basis can be extremely rewarding and addictive. Number three is escape. Sometimes you just don't want to think about real life. Number four, control. A lot of people need to feel more in control, whether that's because of their boss at work, the kids who won't listen to them, or even bullies at school. Having a sense of control can be very appealing. And number five, Kevin Roberts was a little surprised to find out, was the opportunity to express anger. He says that a lot of people who do video games enjoy it as an outlet for their anger, which is not socially appropriate in other circumstances. More insidious than these reasons, the internet can actually change our brain chemistry to make us crave the internet as our drug of choice. As far as the biological effects of technology, and it's not just the stress from the electromagnetic field, which we talked about last time, it's also the effect on attention and the chemical processes in our brain. Just like training a dog, when you want him to do a specific behavior, you give him a little treat that creates a dopamine surge in his brain, and that helps reinforce that pattern of behavior. So the next time you tell him to sit, he sits, he does it a little faster, he does it without thinking about it because he's associated that in his brain with a dopamine spike. That's how our brains learn what behavior is helpful in our environment and what behavior is not helpful. So what I found is it's fascinating, and it's also a little bit scary, but a lot of our technology devices have a similar training effect with our brain chemistry. Virginia, would you say it's an exaggeration to refer to the internet as a drug? What do you think?
I totally wish that I could say that it wasn't, but I happen to agree with you. And, I want to just step back for a second and tell you why, a couple of things that go along with this. Number one, when they did that study in Bavaria that I mentioned earlier, if you have low dopamine levels, you want to raise them. And one of the things that they found in this Deadly Wandering book, there was a great deal of research that was interspersed in between the story of how Reggie Shaw went from being, a pretty carefree teenager to someone that is now crusading and going around to high schools and talking to kids about why they really don't want to text driving at 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 miles an hour, And he's devoted his life to trying to stop the kind of tragedy that he inadvertently caused. But what they found is that when you get the little ding from your phone that you have, a text message, or you get the, Facebook little icon that comes up, you actually have a neurological response to that. Your brain secretes dopamine, so you feel good. Well, most people, animals included, like you mentioned with the dog, are going to do more of what feels good. And so, what is feeling good to billions of people around the globe is those little dopamine squirts that they get from their interaction. Either playing a game. I mean, when they play a game and they zap somebody, they get a sound and they get a visual, and those are both very compelling, positively reinforcing experiences in the brain. What's missing with kids today is, normally when if you were growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, your parents would send you out to the front or the backyard to play, and or around to the neighborhood, and you would find other kids to play with. And if you didn't play nicely, you'd get slugged or you'd get ignored by the other kids. And so you literally were trained by your peers to become a pretty nice kid. It wasn't just your parents that had to take that on. And so now what the kids do is they go home, they get on their individual video games, and maybe they're playing a game together, but they're not in the same room necessarily. Or if they are, the focus is on the screen. And so, are they developing social skills? Not so much. I don't think so. And so, we're basically developing a society in which we're all single individuals interacting with screens, and it's producing an incredible wealth of problems. Your son's in therapy to help him learn how to interact appropriately with other children, and there are millions of kids in therapy now for the very same reason. And if they had to duke it out in somebody's backyard, they probably wouldn't be needing a therapist right now. The second thing, as a pediatric occupational therapist, that I must throw in is that, brain development has a whole lot to do with the sensory motor activities that you do as children. So if you're outside running around needing to be coordinated and paying attention so that you don't fall over and trip or whatever, you are actually maturing the mental aspect of your brain, not just your coordination. And so I have to say, sitting in front of a video game is not developing any coordination other than your, mouse hand. And so that's a kind of a serious issue, because your body consists of more than just your mouse hand, if you know what I mean, and your thumbs or whatever you're doing. So, you had some research that you did that I'd love for you to share about the autism spectrum disorder and gaming from the Cyber Junkie book that you read. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Cyber Junkie was written by Kevin Roberts, who is a recovered video game addict, and he actually now has a business coaching families and teenagers who are experiencing this video game addiction and have seen it has such a negative impact on their life that they've actually gone out to seek professional consultation to help get their kids out from under this. But he has some really interesting research on the impact of, his focus is video games, on the brain and how it changes the brain to act more like an ADD or ADHD brain. Mm-hmm. He says when you do brain scans and look at the brain chemistry of people who are on the autism spectrum or people who are addicts, which might be video games, alcohol, gambling, pornography, or people who play video games excessively, all of these three different groups of people have a similar brain configuration. So it's almost like by becoming a video game addict, you change your brain to be more of an ADD brain, more of an ADHD brain. And once you have developed an addiction, you're more likely to pursue other addictions. A common problem with people who are quitting something, whether they're quitting smoking, alcohol, gambling, they often stop doing the behavior that they're quitting, but replace it with another undesirable addictive behavior. So a lot of people who stop smoking might start eating and gain a lot of weight. A lot of people who give up alcohol replace it with gambling. And it's because, as you mentioned, their brains have been accustomed to getting that little squirt of dopamine when they do their addictive behavior. And if they can't do it one way, they find another way to do it. So the danger that I see here is that when we take a normal, healthy brain and bring it into an environment where we're allowing an addiction to be created through video games or other technology, that we've now created an ADD addictive brain, which will go on to crave other addictions and have the attention problems associated with being on the autism spectrum, essentially. So it's definitely a serious problem. And while my son's autism, he was diagnosed when he was 4, he's fairly high functioning and mostly recovered at this point. I believe his autism was brought on by more of health concerns. I think that this is another environmental factor where the environment shapes not so much the gut health and the body, but it's shaping the brain, and it's resulting in the same disability and the same types of problems. So I think that looking at this as a serious health issue almost, rather than simply a behavioral issue, is something that parents need to be aware of. And especially when they're saying, oh, at least he's safe at home. Oh, he's interacting with his friends on the computer. Oh, I looked at that game. It's not an X-rated game or something like, I don't know what the ratings are, but just because there's not blood and guts doesn't mean that it's not having a negative impact on the brain. The gaming addicts tend to exhibit the ASD behaviors, and they might become neurotic. They can develop tics. They can struggle with depression. They can lack extroversion, and they can become disagreeable. Often their sleep suffers, their grade suffers, and their social skills and relationships with people at school suffer. So it's a problem that goes beyond just, I wish Johnny would join us for longer at the dinner table kind of a thing. It can encompass almost all aspects of the child's life. And as you said, then it really limits down their development of their brain and their body, which I feel we so often forget can be connected. So especially, I know for me, I have a son who is already on the spectrum. This is more of a problem. There's more tendency to become addicted for those people. So I want to add a note to autism parents here, which is basically, your child is already struggling to find rewarding social interactions in the real world. You as a parent are exhausted from meltdowns. It's very tempting and easy to say, let him go play on the computer. He's out of my way. He's having a good time. He's happy. He's watching a video. It's so easy. And sometimes we parents just need a break. But I have found that it is better for my son to be bored and to look at a book or to walk around and talk to himself and play imaginary games. I'm really trying to keep him away from the technology as much as I can, because as someone on the spectrum, he is more prone, he is more vulnerable to addiction in general, and computer and technology addiction in particular. So anyway, it's a real issue, and those are some of the concerns that I think all parents need to be aware of, but especially those who might have kids who are already prone to addiction or being on the autism spectrum.
You have such a unique perspective of being the parent of a child that's on this spectrum. And can you speak a little bit about the social relationships and what happens with that when the children are spending so much time with the screens? What do you see about that? What's your opinion about that?
It's a fraught issue. My husband is in technology. He's a computer programmer, and he started doing this when he was in, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade, and his dad brought home the first computer. So I am sensitive to the fact that technology has a place, and it's one of those, 10,000 hour things, the more that you pursue your education on computers, if that's the direction that you're going in, I do think there's value there. But what I have seen, I'm a big believer in neuroplasticity, and that you can train and shape the brain into all sorts of different directions based primarily on what you expose it to and what behaviors you reward when they're expressed. So one of the things with my son being in therapy for so long, he was doing what's called applied behavioral analysis, which is, I think of as dog training for people. But basically you're looking at the person's normal set of behavior. So when Blake was at preschool, he would wander around and do different activities, and in a natural environment, a kid does this, and some are fun and some aren't. So he tends to do the ones that are more fun for him. The problem with autism is that primarily the things that are fun for most kids, are rewarding for most kids, like talking with your friends while you're coloring, was not fun for him. He had poor fine motor skills, so he was not good at coloring. He did not enjoy the interaction with the other students who were there at the coloring station. And he didn't have a lot of, I guess, conception of what might be a good picture. He would just kind of scribble. He didn't have a goal of, I'm drawing mommy, or this is our house, or something like that. So the things that were typically rewarding for a normal developing child were not rewarding for him. And so his default behavior was he would do something repetitive, like he would go to the sand table and he would run, pour the sand back and forth over and over, very repetitive, no real like game or theme behind it. And then if some other kids would come up to the sand table, he would leave and go somewhere else because he didn't want the trouble of interacting with them. So one of the things that we did in therapy was to create a reward system for doing the desired behavior. So at first the rewards were, you need to choose a table that has at least one other child playing with it. So when there were free time and there were stations set up, he would have to go to a table that had another kid. And then he would get, a check mark on a tally on his sheet of behaviors. And then that eventually led to a reward. So then they raised the bar and they said, now you have to talk with someone at the table. I mean, I'm sort of simplifying here, but that's the general idea. That's how you shape behavior. Then he learned to be good at it. They basically break it down into small enough pieces that the person can accomplish each one. They can encounter rewards for the desired behavior, and then they learn to do it, and it becomes inherently rewarding. Now you have a relationship with these other kids. Now you understand the games that they're playing, and you can choose to join in. And that's essentially how they were breaking down social skills and helping him learn these things. Now let's look at it from the other perspective of computer games and technology. So now, instead of going to learn new skills, you're isolating, you're self-limiting. So you're by yourself, or maybe you chat with people who appear on your text within the game. But you're not interacting, you're not getting that face time. There are actually studies showing that people who use excessive amounts of technology have trouble reading people's faces. They don't understand, I'm telling you one thing, but in the back of my mind, I have reservations, I'm thinking something else. They're not as good at reading people's faces. This is a problem for people on the autism spectrum as well. So I think children in general, as you say, Virginia, really benefit from interaction with their parents and other caring adults, and interaction with kind children of various ages. It doesn't always have to be the first graders. Only play with the first graders. In those neighborhood games, older kids got the experience of kind of helping and mentoring and caring for younger children, which is a great experience for when they babysit and become parents on their own. And they get the experience of looking up to older children to help them and kind of teach them what an older child looks like. What are those responsibilities and privileges that come with being an older child? So we've taken away all that breadth and all of that social community and really limited it down to, here's what we learn in this one formula, be it a video game, be it an educational TV show, be it, whatever technology you're allowing your children to partake in. And I think it's important to look at it from the perspective of not only, is this okay? What are they getting out of watching this movie with family movie night or whatever? Is that okay? I think it's also worth looking at, what are they missing out on? What is the opportunity cost of not doing all of these other things?
So what would parents need to be looking for on the road to addiction? What kind of things would trigger more and more addictive behavior? Because there's probably parents out there that are watching and saying, well, my kids do play these games. What do they need to look out for?
Yes, I do, Virginia. And it's really interesting to look at how the addiction kind of progresses. At first, there's choice involved. So I'm trying to think about what I should do when I come home from school. Should I have a snack? Should I do my homework? Should I flip on the TV and see what's on? Should I call my friends? At first you kind of have a thought process and you say, well, I'll flip on the TV while I make a snack, and then when my show's over, I'll turn it off and I'll do my homework. Then maybe a friend will call me. It's kind of like, it's one of those things that you decide to do. And what happens in the course of addiction is that you go from choosing it to doing it automatically. Just like you automatically flip on the light switch when you enter a dark room. Just like you automatically take a shower when you wake up in the morning, brush your teeth. Just like we do certain things by habit, technology use can become very habitual. So, I'm at a stoplight. It's time to check my phone and see if anything new got posted on Facebook. I woke up in the morning, it's dark. Let me look at what time it is on my phone. Oh wait, I see I got a text while I was asleep. And then you're sitting on the toilet looking at your phone, and your day has started off. You haven't been awake for 30 seconds and you're already on your phone, kind of a thing. So it's very interesting to see how this goes from a choice to an automatic behavior, and it actually makes it a lot harder to kind of quit when you're not even aware of the fact that it's happening. And what can happen is that even when you are trying to quit or get away from it, certain things can trigger that call toward addiction. So just like maybe an alcoholic driving by his favorite bar might suddenly feel the need for a drink, your child going over to a friend's house where he's played video games a lot before, that environment triggers thoughts of video games, and what happens is even the thought or the environment, seeing your cell phone lying on the counter, your routine is that when your kids go to bed, you get on the computer. So when your kids go to bed or you go to the friend's house, all of these sort of triggers where you've used technology in the past, when you encounter that trigger, a little dopamine gets released in your brain. And in the wild, like wild animals, this is kind of related to hunting behavior. So looking for food or looking for mates, when they think about or encounter an environment where that's a possibility, dopamine is released. It makes you more alert, more aware, more active. It creates a state of arousal. And the idea is that you use this extra energy as a seeking behavior to go look for the thing that you want, that you know is going to give you even more dopamine. So, hey, Johnny, we're at your house. Did you get any new Xbox games lately? Like, can we play a video game while we're here? You go into that mode of trying to get access to the addictive device. And it's really interesting. Some parents have gone, and we'll talk about this, how do you cut back on the internet addiction if that's a problem in your household? but parents have found that their children are very creative in terms of going into the attic and finding an old cell phone and a storage box and, you know, figuring out how to charge it and turn it back on so that they can get access to the screen because they need it, and not having it, thinking about it and not having it sends them into that seeking mode where they have more energy to pursue the goal. It's a goal seeking. But you asked what some of the problems were when you actually might start noticing that your kids are having problems. One of the things that scientists have noticed, this is according to a book called The Digital Invasion by Dr. Hart and Dr. Freud. That's Frejd. I'm not sure how she pronounces it, but what they say is that we actually experience less joy in our lives when we're suffering under the burden of a technology addiction, because we lose the ability to find joy in simple things. Snuggling on the couch with our kids, looking at, you know, sitting on a park bench and just watching the sunset over the horizon. Being out in your garden and having a little bird land by you and start chirping at you. So our brains lose the positive associations with these more natural phenomenon, and they focus and rebuild and rewire to be rewarded by the more technology related phenomenon. So depending on the environment that you surround yourself with, the brain will look to find rewarding behaviors there. But if you don't surround yourself enough with the natural environment, you will lose your ability to find joy in that environment. Essentially, those related parts of the brain atrophy and go away. So one of their specific concerns there was losing the ability to remember things. If children are not memorizing their spelling words, for example, they may never learn how to have a strong memory. You know, can they remember a 7-digit phone number? Can they remember things? Having that ability, it's like a muscle in your brain that you need to build up. And if you don't build it up, why should you build it up? You can just Google it. You can just spell check it. Let's ask Siri what the answer to that question is. You kind of don't develop certain life skills that, since this is all new, we don't know what the repercussions will be down the road. But that's what happens. And it's not as if having all of this wiring that creates the dopamine squirts is making us happy. I don't think that technology is necessarily making us a lot happier, Virginia, because what happens is that dopamine flooding leaves us numb. We talked about, you know, bing, you've got mail, you've got a text, whatever it is. When you hear that, you get dopamine. When you look at your phone, you get dopamine. When your kids are crying and you don't want to deal with them and you just look at Facebook for a few minutes to help you relax, you get dopamine. But what happens is when we have too much dopamine always flowing through our system, just like in that Bavaria study, your body re-regulates. So you don't, just like an addict develops a tolerance. So the first time they use the drug, they might get a really good high, but then over time, as they become more and more addicted, the highs kind of fade and it's never quite as rewarding. And soon they're pursuing their drug addiction to escape the pain of not having access to the drug, rather than because the drug is fun and exciting and a wonderful high. So it makes the rest of their life worse, and the only time they feel okay is when they're using the drug. And that's kind of the thing with technology. We lose our sense of peace when we're not with our phone. We're like, oh my gosh, I forgot my phone. I can't drive to the store without my phone. I might need to look at it. Someone might call, someone might text. We don't have a sense of peace when we're away from technology. We just feel more okay when we're with the technology and have access to it. So those are some concerns that those authors brought up from their research, is kind of that we're losing our ability to be okay and to be joyful and to be peaceful as we are, and we're coming to rely more and more on the technology as a crutch. You know, when I was a kid, we had an hour a day of screen time that we were allowed. And I think having some sort of limit on technology use across the board is a good idea, especially at night. I mean, we haven't even talked circadian rhythms, Virginia, but I don't know if you're familiar with this idea that iPhones, computers, that light that's on the screen has a lot of blue light in the spectrum. And our eyes detect that light, and blue light tells our brain and our body that it's daytime. So
I don't know if we mentioned this in our last video, but I believe it was Dr. Klinghardt, might have been Magna Havas, but the recommendation has been that you really turn off all your electronics 3 hours before you go to sleep. And that's horrifying for a lot of people. They can't even imagine turning off, because like you say, you finally got your kids to bed, and so you want to go check Facebook, you want to check your email, but in fact, you could possibly be disturbing your own sleep cycle. And if you've got kids, you're probably going to be getting up early. So somehow there needs to be a way to figure out how you can stay in touch with your friends and family without launching your iPad or whatever, Facebook, at 9 o'clock at night. So that's an important point. You know, I think it would be great if we could give parents, say, 4 different sort of fixes for this technology addiction that we're seeing in so many of the kids.
So the fixes, if you start to notice it's a problem, you need to limit technology, and your family can decide what's right for you. The other thing is to exercise, which plays right back into what you mentioned, Virginia, developing the brain-body connection, coordination, deep relaxation exercises. And Virginia, I'm going to come to you in a moment. Maybe you can talk about your time away from technology and your silent retreat, and whether you discerned any relaxation from that. I think of deep relaxation exercises as meditation, but I've also done some biofeedback, and I've done some like audio tracks where you listen to a planned relaxation exercise. So maybe you lie on your back and you squeeze your toes and then you relax them. You point your toes and then you relax them. And you kind of work your way up your body, your leg muscles, your stomach muscles, your chest muscles, and maybe you spend 15 minutes on learning to relax and being unplugged and being okay with that, and just having a different experience that you create for yourself, whether it's a guided visualization, a guided relaxation, or just a meditation of some kind, to get away from the technology and learn to be okay with that. Rebuild your brain's ability to feel tranquil and to not switch back and forth from one thing to another, multitasking, just to do one thing and relax with it. And you should see improved sleep from this. And going back to the blue light issue, what we did was to, on your computer, you can install a program called Flux, which changes the color tone of your screen. It basically makes it more orange after sunset, so you're not getting as much blue light from your computer screen. You can also get a film, like a blue blocker film, to put on your cell phone or your iPad, so that it's not shining blue light at your eyes. And you can also wear orange glasses. So that's a way to block out that blue light from devices. So Virginia, I don't know if you'd be open to sharing a little bit of your experience, and then maybe we can close with the idea of the digital fast and what we need to do if we need to kind of take some more extreme steps, what one doctor recommends for that.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So just reviewing, you said number 1, limit technology. Number 2, exercise. Number 3, deep relaxation, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then number 4, improve your sleep by some of those suggestions of less blue light and more orange light if you need to be on the computer. So my comment about on a yearly basis, my husband and I go to Montana, and we are quiet for 8 days. And um, there's not too many folks that can probably take that many days out of their schedule, but there's something that you can easily do on a daily basis, which is to either late at night or early in the morning is a great time before your kids get up. And it doesn't require a lot of effort. So even if you're setting your alarm clock like 20 minutes earlier, you're probably just going to be, you'll get up and you'll go and sit either inside or outside. If it's a really nice summer day that you could always go outside. There's really two kinds of meditation that we were focusing on. One is you're focusing inward, and in that one, you're simply following your breath. And don't worry, you're going to have other thoughts that come in and out. Usually at home, what I do is I have one of these little Zen alarm clocks, so it makes a little ding at the end of 20 minutes, but a common kitchen timer set on a low ring works just fine. Go sit in a chair or someplace other than your bed, because the temptation is too great to just lay back down again. And so if you're doing the inward meditation, you're going to focus on your breath, breathe in, breathe out, and thoughts will come in, and then just go back to your breath. And the outward focus would be that you would go outside. Maybe you have a hot tub. You'll go sit in the hot tub for 20 minutes, and you're going to look at the trees, look at the clouds, look at the sunrise. You're just not doing anything else other than being. And we don't do a lot of being anymore. We're usually doing things. And so if you can discipline yourself to do that 20 minutes, preferably early in the morning, I think you'll be amazed at how well your day will go. And, doing it for 8 days, you come back and you're really incredibly refreshed, and then ready to start back into your life with a lot more creativity. It's as if you've sort of emptied out your brain so that new thoughts can come in. And you can do that on a daily basis quite easily. Just start, if you can't do 20 minutes, start with 10. I really probably wouldn't do less than 10, but you can move from 10 to 20. And I think what you'll find after you've done this for, say, 3 months is that you would just love this part of your day. And it will greatly improve how the rest of your day goes and how patient you are with yourself, your husband, your children, your friends, your partner, whoever. So that is my recommendation for really coping with the necessity to be involved with technology. But this provides a little bit of balance so that the technology isn't running you and your brain. You're using the technology when you choose to. And, everybody kind of wants to be in control of their life. And sometimes we really forget or even are unaware, which is part of the point of this videotape, that technology is having a huge effect on our brains, and we're not even aware of it. We want to be able to stimulate dopamine by looking at a beautiful sunset or a sunrise, not by waiting for a text message to come in. So that's kind of I guess you'd say, our back to nature for at least 20 minutes, once a day. I think you'll find that it'll be really helpful. So
I love the idea, Virginia, of that meditation retreat, whether it's for a week or just for a few moments. I think sometimes my brain just gets slipping so fast. I feel like I know I should be thinking of something and I'm not sure what it is, and I feel anxious that I don't know. And just being able to let go, I'm going to start doing that and see. I'll report back to you on my results. Another thing that I've tried to be more conscious about since we started researching for this video is not using my phone when my children are present. So whether it's in the morning and I'm making breakfast, or they've come home from school and I'm getting snacks, no longer do I listen to podcasts during that time. No longer do I keep my phone by the stove so I can check it while their eggs are cooking. I have plugged it in, charging, put it in the cupboard, and I'm saving it for later when they're not with me. But I want to be present and available to help them. I don't want to use it as a crutch when they make me irritated, which happens somewhat often. And I want them to have me as a role model of someone who's living a fine life without a phone in front of their face. I don't want this to be their image of mom. You know, oh, what, honey, are you talking to me? Oh, I'm almost ready to talk to you. You know, I want them to see my face and my smile, and they can see if I'm ready to talk or if I'm irritated because I burned the eggs. I want them to see my face and not my phone. So I think that as another discipline is a good thing for parents to think about. You know, you only have a few hours a day with your kids once they're in school. So how can you make the most of it and help them learn to be the type of person that you want them to be? So that being said, I want to kind of end with, this is a prescription from a doctor who specializes, her name is Dr. Victoria Dunkley. She's an MD, and she works with kids who have kind of a lot of unexplained mental health problems: tics, depression, anger, meltdowns, lying, all sorts of different things that can be a result of an overdependence on technology. So she actually has written a book that we'll mention in the comments about how to do a 3-week technology fast to help your child's brain reset. It's basically allowing some of those technology addiction areas to atrophy and building up the other side of the brain that is meant to interact with the rest of the world. So concrete results that she has seen are fewer meltdowns, better grades, better social skills, better sleep, better compliance, which means following directions. And if they've had problems with tics, depression, antisocial disorder, some of the more extreme things, those have been improved too. So now, as with most things, it often gets worse before it gets better. When I studied psychology, they had something that was called an extinction burst. So if you've always been able, let's say you're a kid and mommy always buys you a comic book when you go to the grocery store, and mommy decides, well, you know, we need to save money, we're not going to be buying those comic books anymore. The first couple times that you go to the grocery store, the kid will have a fit. If they used to have to ask you, mommy, I want a comic book, mommy, buy me Archie comic book, let's say 5 times, and then you would buy them the comic book. Now they're asking you 5, 10, 15, 20. The more you've given into them in the past, the more they will ask, and the longer they will persist in this horrible, very unpleasant extinction burst. And then finally, if they ask 20 times and you were able to hold out 21, you won that battle, and they're starting to learn that you mean what you say, and it's not going to happen. So the same thing happens when you go on a technology fast. So this is a complete cold turkey, no screens anywhere type of a thing. And the kids will go bonkers trying to convince you that this is unfair, you're mean, nobody else has this, I'm going to live at Susie's house, whatever it is. It's going to be unpleasant for a few days, but that usually abates within just a couple of days. And the positive outcomes that I mentioned start happening right after that period. Within a couple days, you'll see better sleep, better mood, more creativity and physicality, Virginia, for the occupational therapists in the group. And the benefits continue to develop over the weeks and months to follow. Eventually, basically, they're getting better grades, they have better social skills, and a better self-image because they know that they are a competent and successful person in a wide variety of areas. I think that's, you know, we talked about opportunity cost of video games. They're not having the opportunity to participate and achieve in a wide variety of things. Yes, you might have high points on the scoreboard at the video arcade, but have you been volunteering? Have you been seeing the gleam in people's eye when you help them with things? You know, you're missing out on those. So here's what she suggests getting rid of for the technology fast. No cell phones, no video games, no digital cameras, which I thought was interesting. No iPads, iPods, Wii, any of that. So basically, if it has a screen, get rid of it. She does allow some family television time, which I thought was interesting. So you could still have a movie night, for example. She says that because it's not as interactive, like you can't control what the characters are on the screen are doing, then it's not as addictive. So I don't know, if I was trying to do a clean break for 3 weeks, I think I'd just get rid of the TV too, but the doctor says that's not necessary. So here's what you do to get started. First, you, just like with ABA, you kind of define the behavior as it is. What's your starting point? And what are you trying to improve? Is your kid mouthing off to you? Is he depressed and won't come out of his room? He's not joining you for dinner. His grades are suffering. What specifically are you going to be measuring to track whether this experiment is a success or not? Second, you've got to get your spouse and your caregivers on board, which, you know, I remember when my husband, when my kids were younger, I used to go out and say, you know, it's Saturday, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Like, can you watch the kids until I get back? And then I would come back and I would find out his version of watching the kids had been to let them, you know, zone out watching Curious George on the iPad. And I was like, you know, I watched them all week without any TV, and then, you know, you let them watch the iPad. And I was very like, I did not like that. I felt like cheating. So it's easy to watch kids if you employ technology, and it's a lot harder, especially if they don't like it, when you don't let them use technology. So getting your spouse and then any like babysitters, or let's say they go to childcare and the TV is always on at childcare, you know, that could be an issue. Or they go over to a friend's house on Wednesdays and the friend has an Xbox. You've got to monitor and police all the different environments, whether it's, you know, school, friends, babysitter, so that everybody is on board, because it's not just when they're home, it's all throughout their environment. They've, you know, she's had problems where people were doing this and the kid wasn't getting better, and they were troubleshooting it, and they found out the kid was playing video games at his aunt's house after school. So they had to talk to the aunt and get her on board. So it really is important to make it a universal fast. The third thing is to get something fun for the kids to do that's not technology. They need a replacement activity. So if they're usually spending 4 hours a day on technology, what else can they do for those 4 hours that are going to be fun, hopefully? Books, puzzles, games, you know, soccer ball, join a sports team. Get a plan so that it's not just sitting around the house, I'm bored, what am I going to do? I wish I could play my games. They need a replacement. Number 5 is looking at self-care for parents. It's a lot more work to parent your kids than to let them watch TV, or play video games, whatever it might be. So there's going to be a lot more demands on the parents during these 3 weeks. And oftentimes the parents, you know, we used to call the TV the electronic babysitter, because, you know, I come home from work, I'm stressed out, I need to make dinner, you guys watch a show and just stay out of my hair while I make dinner. Then we'll have a family dinner together. So finding a way that the parents can get some support to get away or do something that they enjoy and bring the kids along, whatever it might be. But if you're using your kids' screen time as a parenting break, then you as the parent need to provide a replacement activity for yourself as well. How is that going to be handled? Number 6 is to involve the whole family. So ideally, other kids are not, you know, if it's your son with ADD who's on the technology fast, it would be nice if siblings were not, no, I'm going to go play Xbox, but you can't come in here. You know, maybe it's a fast for everybody. Maybe they're not allowed to use technology in front of the person for whom this is prescribed. But deciding how you're going to handle that if you've got more than one kid is a good idea. And then the big step is to sweep the house and get out all the technology. So if your kid can find it, he's going to find a way to make it work, and then he's going to break the fast. So just like if you're going on a new diet, you get all the Snickers bars out of your cabinet, you need to get rid of the technology that's around your house, and certainly nothing that would be accessible from the child's bedroom. Duh. So her last step, which I thought was interesting to see in a medical doctor book, Virginia, is something we've talked about off the air, but just setting an intention. So she's asking parents to write out basically a mission statement. You know, we are engaging in a family technology fast from August 1st to August 31st, with the goal of helping bring our family closer together, helping our children learn to experience joy outside and in nature and through relationships with other people, and specifically to help little Johnny feel calmer each day and to reduce his meltdowns from three per day that he's currently experiencing to ideally one or none. And having something very concrete and loving as a mission statement, just so A, we all know that we're on the same page. B, you set an intention to the universe, power of your thoughts. And 3, when times are tough and little Johnny is crying and whining for his Game Boy, that you can refer back to that and be strengthened by it. So there's actually a lot of people during summer vacation use a whole month, and they just take a month as a family. It's a beautiful time to be outdoors. They use that month as a technology fast where everyone experiences that. And I think that's a beautiful idea. But if your situation is more urgent with your kids' behavior, seriously consider this. I think it's a great prescription for better health for everyone.
No, I think that what you're prescribing is what I'm also saying for the parents, that they can have their technology fast for 20 minutes every morning, at least. And I love what you said about when your children are home, you're on a technology fast, unless you're waiting to pick up your kid and you need to get a text message about when to pick up your other child. But basically, you are fully engaged and available for your child, and they're going to know it. I mean, if you're distracted, children know it. And so by you really taking on the role of mom or dad fully and giving them your attention, your children are going to feel loved, and I'm sure their development will be just much better and family life will be much better. So I love the idea of a technology fast, and I love the idea of the daily technology fast, the meditation, the quiet time in the morning. And if people can do that, I think life is going to be more fun.